There's a moment in The Lord of the Rings that still gives fans nightmares. Not the Balrog, not even Shelob. It's when an orc commander looks directly into the camera with a face that seems wrong, too intelligent, too cruel. And then he speaks. But here's what most people don't know. That orc wasn't even the worst Middle-earth had to offer. What if I told you that Tolkien's world contained orc warriors so terrifying that entire dwarf kingdoms collapsed at the mere mention of their names? Creatures that didn't just kill, they orchestrated genocides, hunted bloodlines, and turned battlefields into theaters of calculated horror. Today we're diving into the nightmare fuel that is Middle-earth's most fearsome orcs. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why even the bravest warriors would rather face a dragon.
Section 1. The Butcher. Let's start with a name that sends chills down any Tolkien scholar's spine. Gorgal the Butcher. Most people have never heard of him. He doesn't appear in the movies. He barely gets mentioned in the books. But there's a reason Sauron himself gave him that title. During the First Age, when Middle-earth was still young and the Dark Lord Morgoth ruled from his fortress of Angband, Gorgal wasn't just another orc captain. He was the orc captain, the one Sauron personally chose for his most brutal assignments. His target? A band of human heroes led by Barahir, who possessed a ring given to him by the elf king Finrod Felagund. Not a ring of power, mind you, just a symbol. But Morgoth wanted it. More than that, he wanted to prove a point. So he sent Gorgal. What happened next became legend for all the wrong reasons. Gorgal didn't just ambush Barahir's company. He systematically hunted them down, one by one, through the wilderness of Dorthonion. When it was over, every single member of that legendary band lay dead. Gorgal claimed the ring and wore it as a trophy. But here's where it gets darker. Gorgal had plans of his own. He wasn't content being Sauron's attack dog. He plotted to betray his master, to keep the ring for himself, and carve out his own kingdom of terror. That never happened, though. Beren, Barahir's son, tracked Gorgal down and killed him in single combat, reclaiming his father's ring. But think about what that means. An orc so powerful, so feared, that killing him became the stuff of heroic legend. That's the caliber of enemy we're talking about. Section 2. The Pale Orc. Now, let's talk about someone you probably do recognize, Azog the Defiler. If you've seen the Hobbit movies, you know him as the massive pale orc with the missing arm who hunts Thorin Oakenshield. But the movie version barely scratches the surface of how terrifying Azog actually was in Tolkien's writings. In the year 2790 of the Third Age, King Thror of the Dwarves made a fatal mistake. He decided to revisit Khazad-dûm, the legendary dwarf kingdom also known as Moria, which had been abandoned after a Balrog awoke in its depths. Thror walked through those great gates with only one companion, Nar, thinking perhaps his people could reclaim their ancestral home. He never walked out. Azog had taken Moria as his domain. When Thror entered, Azog's orcs captured him. They tortured him for days. Then Azog personally beheaded the dwarf king, branded his own name into Thror's forehead, and threw the severed head at Nar along with the purse of worthless coins. His message was clear. This is what happens to dwarf beggars who enter my realm. That single act ignited the war of the dwarves and orcs. 9 years of relentless warfare beneath the mountains. Every dwarf clan mobilized. They hunted Azog's forces from Gundabad to the Gladden Fields, sacking orc stronghold after orc stronghold. The war culminated in the Battle of Azanulbizar, fought right before Moria's gates. Thousands died on both sides. Young Thorin Oakenshield earned his name during this battle when his shield was broken and he fought on using an oak branch as a shield instead. But Azog, he strode out from Moria's gates with his personal guard, massive orcs clad in iron, and proceeded to dominate the battlefield. He killed Nain, one of the dwarf lords, with contemptuous ease. He was only brought down when Nain's son, Dane, still a young dwarf at the time, chased him up the steps and beheaded him with a single mighty strike. That's right, it took a feat of legendary valor by a future dwarf king to finally end Azog's reign of terror. And even then, they had to impale his head on a spike with that same purse of coins stuffed in his mouth as a final insult. The fact that killing him became a defining moment in dwarf history tells you everything you need to know about how feared Azog was.
The Inheritor, 645 to 930. But Azog's death didn't end the nightmare, because his son Bolg inherited his father's hatred and possibly exceeded his cruelty. For 150 years, Bolg ruled the northern orcs from Mount Gundabad. He waited, he planned, and when the opportunity came, he struck with devastating force. The death of Smaug the dragon in 2941 created a power vacuum. Suddenly, the vast treasure hoard of Erebor lay relatively unguarded, drawing the attention of elves, men, and dwarves. As these forces gathered and squabbled over gold, Bolg saw his chance. He secretly assembled a massive army, orcs from the Misty Mountains and Grey Mountains, packs of wargs, and even clouds of bats so thick they blocked out the sun. They marched east through the Grey Mountains, a tide of malice heading straight for the Lonely Mountain. What made Bolg truly terrifying wasn't just his military power, it was his tactical intelligence. He timed his attack perfectly, hitting when the forces of good were divided and arguing amongst themselves. His personal bodyguard consisted of massive orcs wielding steel scimitars, elite warriors that could cut through regular soldiers like paper. During the Battle of Five Armies, Bolg's forces nearly achieved complete victory. They attacked from multiple directions, scaled the mountain itself, and assaulted the allied forces from above and behind. When Thorin Oakenshield made his desperate final charge, trying to break through to Bolg himself, the Orcs' chieftain's bodyguard stopped him cold. They surrounded Thorin. They struck him down. They killed his nephews, Fili and Kili, as the brothers tried to defend their uncle's body. Bolg himself was only stopped when Bjorn, the massive shapeshifter in bear form, smashed through the orc ranks like a living battering ram and crushed the orc chieftain personally. It took a being of near mythical power to finally end Bolg's threat. Think about that. 2 generations of a single orc bloodline, Azog and Bolg, caused so much devastation that their names are still spoken with dread thousands of years later. Section 4. The Lieutenant. Now we come to perhaps the most enigmatic and chilling orc in all of Middle-earth, Gothmog, Lieutenant of Morgul. Here's what makes Gothmog different from every other orc we've discussed. Nobody actually knows what he was. Tolkien only mentions him once in The Lord of the Rings, during the Battle of Pelennor Fields. When the Witch King of Angmar is killed by Éowyn and Merry, someone has to take command of Sauron's massive army. That someone is Gothmog. The text calls him the Lieutenant of Morgul. That's it. No description of his appearance, no backstory, just a name and a title. And yet that single mention carries enormous weight. Why? Because of what happens next. Gothmog immediately takes control of the chaotic battlefield. He's not just some brute swinging a sword, he's a strategic commander. He calls up reserves from Osgiliath, Easterlings, Southrons, Variags, and even the dreaded Trollmen. He coordinates a multi-pronged assault on the Rohirrim cavalry that's been devastating the orc forces. His tactical acumen is terrifying. He recognizes the turning point in the battle and adapts instantly, shifting his forces with precision. The fact that he can command such respect and obedience from diverse troops after the Witch King's death speaks volumes about his authority. In Peter Jackson's films, Gothmog is portrayed as a hideously deformed orc, pale, diseased, with a crippled arm and twisted face. The design was intentionally crafted to represent the ugliness of Mordor. But here's the thing. Some Tolkien scholars don't even think he was an orc at all. Some theories suggest Gothmog was a black Númenórean, one of the corrupted humans who served Sauron. Others propose he might have been a Nazgul, one of the unnamed ringwraiths. The most terrifying theory? That he was a bulldog, a fallen Maya, essentially a corrupted angel who took orc form specifically to command armies. That Sindarin name, Gothmog, means dread oppressor, is itself suspicious. Orcs didn't typically have elegant elvish names. This suggests something more ancient, more powerful than a regular orc captain. The mystery itself is part of what makes Gothmog so chilling. He appears for one brief moment, commands absolute authority over the forces of darkness, and then vanishes from history. We don't even know for certain how he died, although the extended films show Aragorn and Gimli finishing him off.
Section 5. The Pattern. So, what connects all these orcs? What makes them more terrifying than the countless thousands of nameless orcs that populate Middle-earth's wars? Intelligence, strategic thinking, personal vendetta. These weren't mindless monsters. Gorgol plotted betrayal against Sauron himself. Azog turned his brutality into psychological warfare, specifically targeting the line of Durin. Bolg patiently waited 150 years before striking. Gothmog commanded multi-ethnic armies with precision. They represent something deeper in Tolkien's mythology, the corruption of reason itself. Orcs were originally elves, according to the most common origin story. Beautiful, immortal beings twisted and tortured by Morgoth until they became something unrecognizable. These elite orcs retained fragments of that original intelligence, but channeled it entirely toward cruelty and domination. And here's what really keeps you up at night. They nearly won. Gorgol wiped out an entire band of heroes. Azog triggered a 9-year war that decimated dwarf kingdoms. Bolg came within moments of complete victory at the Battle of Five Armies. Gothlog orchestrated a tactical masterpiece during the siege of Minas Tirith. Each of them was only stopped by acts of extreme heroism or supernatural intervention. Regular soldiers couldn't handle them. It took legendary warriors, shapeshifters, or future kings to finally bring them down. Conclusion. The genius of Tolkien's world-building isn't just in creating evil, it's in creating evil that thinks, plans, and almost succeeds. These orcs weren't the faceless cannon fodder we often see in fantasy. They were characters with their own terrible agency. They made choices, they pursued goals, they adapted their strategies, and they left scars on Middle-earth that lasted for generations. When we watch the Lord of the Rings films and see thousands of orcs charging across battlefields, it's easy to forget that among those masses might lurk another Azog, another Bolg, another Gothmog, a nightmare given form and purpose, waiting for the right moment to change history. That's what makes them truly terrifying, not their strength or their numbers, but their intelligence turned entirely toward destruction. The movies gave us glimpses of this horror. The books preserved their legends. And fans continued to debate and discuss these creatures precisely because they tap into something primal, the fear of an enemy that's not just powerful, but smart enough to use that power effectively. So the next time you see an orc commander in Middle-earth, remember, some of them earned their positions through more than just brute force. Some of them were the stuff of nightmares. And in Tolkien's world, nightmares have names. Thanks for watching. If you found this as fascinating and disturbing as I did, hit that subscribe button. And if you survived this entire video without looking over your shoulder even once, you're braver than Thor in Oakenshield. Until next time, may your enemies be less intelligent than the orcs of Middle-earth.